If you've been frustrated by the progress of SpaceX's Starship, we get it. The spaceship has been delayed from its first orbital for a long time. However, as the boss said on Twitter, the Starship is finally ready to fly in July. How did the Starship finally become ready? What has SpaceX done to satisfy the regulatory agencies? Join us as we bring you how SpaceX is finally launching the Starship to orbit in July 2022. The Starship is SpaceX's next-generation rocket that the company's CEO, Elon Musk, wants to use to power his Mars ambition. It is specially built to reduce the cost of space travel so that the many trips needed to prepare the Red Planet for human habitation are not prohibitively expensive. To achieve this, the Starship is completely reusable and can handle hundreds of launches. SpaceX first got into the reusable rocket business with its Falcon series rockets, but those were only partially reusable. However, the space exploration company has gathered enough experience to attempt to develop and operate a completely reusable rocket. The Starship has two stages, the upper and lower, and the two will separate after escaping the Earth's gravitational pull. The lower stage, known as the Super Heavy, will immediately return to land, although sometimes it will not land in the real sense because there are strong arms attached to the launch tower that will catch the booster mid-air and set it on the launch mount. The booster will be ready for the next flight within an hour, as SpaceX targets at least 1,000 launches per year. Meanwhile, the upper stage, known confusingly as the Starship or simply the ship, will continue to its destination. Apart from Mars missions, the ship can take astronauts to the moon, deliver heavy cargo to space stations, carry fuel to top up other starships, and much more. It can also launch satellites to orbit for SpaceX itself and other clients, including different militaries worldwide. And while it is a spacecraft, the Starship will serve us on the Earth's surface as well. For instance, the US Army has begun evaluating how it can be used to transport huge cargo quickly from one point to another and even personnel. SpaceX itself envisions using it to provide rapid commercial transport that cuts the time of traveling between cities significantly. There is a special use for the Starship in connection with Musk's Mars colonization plans. The spacecraft will serve as the initial shelter for Mars volunteers before they find their bearings on the harsh planet. The Starship is the most powerful rocket, and it has to be capable of performing the many functions mentioned already. Thanks to the Raptor engines, which SpaceX has massively upgraded, which it has developed in tandem with the rocket, the Starship can lift up to 150 metric tons of payload to orbit. The initial carrying capacity was 100 metric tons, but multiple upgrades have now increased its performance. The ship stands 50 meters tall and 9 meters in diameter, with enough space for 1,200 tons of fuel. It produces 3.2 mega-pound-foot of thrust thanks to 6 Raptor engines. The Super Heavy is even more powerful and larger, measuring almost 70 meters in height and 9 meters in diameter. The boss himself, Musk, has confirmed that the Starship will soon roar to life on all its engines in the first flight to orbit in July after a protracted wait. He said this on his favorite medium of communication, Twitter, which he is trying to buy. You could ask him a question about any of his companies, as a fan did in June. Musk kicked up excitement to the SpaceX fandom by replying that the Starship would finally be ready for its maiden flight to orbit by July. While that news alone was massive enough, Musk revealed more of SpaceX's plans in the next tweet. He said another Starship would be ready in August to fly again, and then it would become a monthly affair. That is a far cry from the situation just a few months ago, when there was uncertainty as to when the first flight would take place. This is not a small thing because it means SpaceX will produce a pair of ship and booster every month. So what changed for this massive turnaround in the Starship's fortune to happen? The SpaceX team deserves its credit for their hard and innovative work, but one serious impediment that the company faced has been removed. SpaceX has finally obtained environmental approval from the FAA and relevant federal, state, and local stakeholders to conduct orbital Starship launches on the South Texas coast. This is coming after months of delays that were poorly communicated by the FAA, but the agency has finally issued the company an extremely favorable mitigated finding of no significant impact, or mitigated FONSI. The approval will now allow SpaceX to proceed with orbital launches of the Starship at its Boca Chica facility in Texas. The approval did not come easily, as SpaceX had to agree to dozens upon dozens of mitigation actions that would take a significant amount of work to complete and maintain. These were stipulated in order to alleviate some of the launch site's environmental impact partially. SpaceX also had to axe its plan to construct its own natural gas power plant, desalination plant, and natural gas refinery and liquefaction facilities at or near the launch site. Meanwhile, on the plus side, SpaceX got many of what it requested, including permission for up to 500 hours of highway closures for nominal operations and up to 300 hours of closures for emergency anomaly response per year. This was far better than the 180 hours per year it got for the Falcon rocket launches in 2014. One part of the Starship that SpaceX has focused on a lot is the tank. To make room for the new tank system, the company has redesigned the dome of the Starship. However, the upgrades have also been focused on making the domes easier to build. The crew began working seriously on the upgraded Starship nose prototypes around the turn of the year. The new domes took a bit longer when the company completed the first prototype in mid-March. To an extent, the new dome went even further than SpaceX's slightly more modest nose redesign because it drastically simplified the structure into just one main component. Whereas the nose redesign simplified nose assembly from 5 to 3 different stacked sets of welded gauze or tapering slices of metal, SpaceX appears to have more or less reduced the number of stacked sections in the dome from 3 to 1. This means the new dome only requires 18 gauze and a small cap compared to the old design, which required up to 40 different parts. At the same time, SpaceX has improved the efficiency because even though more compact, it can still hold the same amount of propellant in the tank. SpaceX finished assembling the first E-Dome test tank in late May or early June. The tank contains 2 upgraded domes and 5 steel rings that are 9 meters or 30 feet wide and tall. Both domes have a single pipe, one for a set of vent valves and the other for filling or draining the tank of liquid nitrogen. These tanks are usually qualified with a pneumatic or water test to check for leaks and ensure basic structural integrity. They will also undergo cryogenic tests using liquid nitrogen. The crew has to be sure the tanks can survive operation at about 6.5 bar, but be able to bear up to 8.5 bar of pressure. Meanwhile, SpaceX has been passing the Starship itself through a series of tests. The Ship 24 prototype is expected to be the one to carry out the first orbital flight, and the crew has been working around the clock to get it ready. Early in June, the ship fully passed pneumatic-proof testing on the second attempt. A day later, SpaceX completed the first cryogenic proof test successfully. With these basics done, SpaceX was ready to install Ship 24 on one of the company's suborbital Starship test and launch pads. In 2 months, the crew had significantly modified Pad A to support Ship 24's upgraded design and to put it to the test by using giant hydraulic rams to simulate the thrust of Raptor engines. About 12 hours after completing the first cryo-proof test, SpaceX carried out 2 more, qualifying as success on the first tries. The first one involved Ship 24 venting with its nose vents, indicating that both the main tanks and the smaller pair of landing propellants may have been filled and pressurized. SpaceX also likely used the hydraulic rams on the mount to test the new aft on Ship 24 by simulating the operation of 6 Raptor engines. Ship 24 is destined to take 6 of the new Raptor engine. These new engines can produce 25% more thrust than the original version. The ship will have 3 smaller sea-level optimized Raptors and 3 more vacuum-optimized variants. This means that at full throttle, Ship 24 could produce up to 14,000 tons of thrust, which is about double the capacity of the booster of the Falcon 9. After this, SpaceX took Ship 24 back to the high bay, where it will be fitted with its rocket engines. The next outing to the launch pad will probably see the ship undergoing a wet dress rehearsal and static fire testing. This is the point where it will be determined if Ship 24 is actually fit for an orbital launch. By that time, SpaceX would have installed aero covers and raceways and filled the gaps in the heat shield on the ship. Let's hear what you think of the Starship in the comments section below.